Out here, farm dogs always outlive the ones kept in town. And it was never a secret just how we fed them. While everyone else pays more each year for a bag off the shelf, the old farmers kept their dogs strong on one plain thing from the land. My name is Eli Miller, and I've kept animals on this land since I was just a boy. If you want the old, simple ways of keeping animals healthy, subscribe. It's what I share here every week. Let me show you the one thing they still put in the bowl.
Now, the thing I'm speaking of is the bone. Just the bone. The knuckle and the shank and the marrow heart of it, the very thing near every kitchen in the land nowadays, scrapes off the plate and drops in the trash without a second thought.
Most folks look at a bone as nothing, a leftover, a thing the meat came off of, done its work, fit only for the bin.
But hear me plain. That bone, and the good rich broth a body can draw from it, was one of the oldest and most trusted things a farm ever gave its dogs. Cheap as dirt. Cheaper for it cost nothing at all, being what was already there once supper was done. And it did a dozen jobs you now buy a dozen costly bottles and bags to do. The powders for the joints, the pills for the belly, the special food for the coat, the drops for the teeth, the tonic for the old dog who's gone off his feed. All of it sold to us now in bright packages with long names, and every bit of it once came out of one plain bone and the pot it simmered in. I want to give you the whole of it today, what the old farmers put in the bowl, and why it worked, and how it kept a dog on his legs long past the years a town dog ever gets. And when I'm through, I don't reckon you'll ever look at a bone the same way again. I learned it the way I learned most everything worth the knowing. Not out of a book, not from any doctor of animals, but from the ones who came before me. My grandfather kept dogs on this same ground, and his father before him, and not one of them ever bought a bag of feed in his life. Couldn't have, and wouldn't have if he could. The dogs ate near enough what the family ate, and what the family couldn't eat, the bones, the trimmings, the broth off the Sunday pot, went straight into the dog's dish. And those dogs worked hard, and lived long, and went gray in the muzzle, still trotting out to meet you at the gate. My grandmother had a saying, and I've never forgot it. She said, a dog is only ever as strong as what you pour into him, and you cannot pour strength out of a paper sack. She meant it plain. She'd seen the town dogs soft and itchy and old before their time, and she'd seen ours. And she knew the difference didn't come from luck, nor from any fancy doctoring. It came from the bowl. It always came from the bowl. I remember, plain as if it were yesterday, an old shepherd my grandfather kept when I was a boy, no higher than the kitchen table. Shep. He was called a plain name for a plain, good dog. And that dog was 16 years old, if he was a day. And still he'd rise up of a morning and walk the fence line with my grandfather, slow but steady. His coat still black and shining, his eyes still bright, his teeth still white and sound in his head. 16 years. Folks in town would bury a dog at 9 or 10 and call it a good long life and a great sorrow. But we'd not have thought a thing of 16. For that was only ordinary out here. That was only what a bone and a pot of broth and a little plain care will buy you if you'll trouble to give it. I watched my grandfather ladle that broth over Shep's supper every single evening of that dog's long life, and I never once forgot it. It went into me the way the important things do when you're small, quiet, and deep, and for keeps.
Quick word before we move on. A lifetime around animals teaches you more than fits in any one video. So I finally sat down and wrote it all out, start to finish, in a book. The feeding, the daily care, the little signs I watch for long before anything goes wrong, the links pinned at the top of the comments. That's the whole of it, laid out plain. No hunting through videos to find it. Take it or leave it. Now, back to the animals.
So let me start where the old farmers started, with the bone itself, raw and whole, before it ever saw the pot. When a farmer butchered, or when a big roast was done and carved down to nothing, the good heavy bones went to the dogs. Not the little ones. Mind, never the little brittle splintery ones, but the big knuckle bones and the shank bones, the ones too broad to swallow and too hard to crack. And the dog would carry his prize off to the shade of an afternoon and work at it for an hour, gnawing and scraping and turning it in his paws. And while he was at it, he was doing a thing no soft food out of a bag has ever done for a dog in this world. He was cleaning his own teeth. You take a town dog, fed nothing but soft food out of a sack his whole life long, and look in his mouth by the time he's 7 or 8 years old. The teeth are brown, the gums are sore and swollen. The breath would knock you flat across the room. And half the misery in an old dog, half of it, I'd wager, starts right there in the mouth, and teeth gone to rot, and gums gone bad, and the poor folk who love him never once think to look.
But a dog that's had a real bone to work at all his days keeps his teeth clean and white and sound.
The gnawing scrapes the tartar off the way no brush and no crunchy little pellet ever could. The chewing keeps the jaw strong and the gums pink and healthy. It is the plainest thing in all the world, and it was the very first thing we lost the day we started buying the bag. Now here I'll stop and give you one honest word, because it matters, and I'll not have any dog come to harm on account of something I said. The bone you give raw and whole and big. You never, and hear me plain on this, you never give a dog a cooked bone. A cooked bone is a different creature altogether. The cooking dries it out and turns it brittle, and it splinters into sharp little daggers that can cut a dog inside where you cannot see it and cannot help it. So the roast bone off your Sunday table, the one that's been hours in the oven, that one is not for the dog. Into the trash it goes. The raw bone, fresh, is the one you want, and you give it to him under your own eye, sized right to his mouth, big enough that he cannot swallow it whole nor snap a piece off to choke on. A little dog gets a little care and a smaller bone. A big dog gets a big one. That's the whole of the rule, and it isn't hard to keep, but the raw bone is only the half of it. The other half, and this is the part I reckon does the most good of all, so mark it well, is the broth. The old-time bone broth, drawn low and slow out of those same bones, is near the finest thing a body can pour into a dog's bowl, and it's the one thing I want you to carry away from all I'm telling you today, above every other. Here is how it was done, and how I do it yet, out in my own kitchen. You take your bones, a beef knuckle, a chicken carcass, the necks and the feet, whatever the butchering has left you, and you put them all in a great deep pot and cover them over with cold water. Then you drop in a splash of plain vinegar, just a spoonful or two, no more. That vinegar isn't for the taste of it. It's there to pull the good up out of the bone, to draw the marrow and the minerals out of the hard center and into the water where the dog can get at them. Then you bring it up to a bare simmer, the barest whisper of a bubble, no hard rolling boil, and you let it be. Not for an hour, not for two. You let it go the whole day long and on into the night. 12 hours and a full day and more for the big beef bones, until the water has gone dark and rich and the bones themselves have given up every last thing they had to give. Then you strain it all off, and you let it cool. And when it's cold, you lift the hard cap of fat off the top and you throw that fat away. And what's left underneath, once it's good and cold, will have set up soft, like a jelly, so it wobbles when you tip the bowl. And that wobble, that soft set, that is the whole prize. That is what you were after all along. And I'll tell you, there is a comfort in the making of it that I'd not want you to miss. A pot of bones going low on the back of the stove all the day long fills a house with a smell that is old as the hills, warm and deep and honest. The smell of a home where somebody is minding things. My mother kept a pot going most every week, and the whole kitchen would take on that scent by afternoon, and the dogs knew it too. They'd lie by the door with their noses working, patient, waiting on their share, for they knew as well as we did what was coming. It cost her almost nothing to make a handful of bones that would otherwise have gone to waste, a little water, a little time. That was the whole genius of the old way. It wasted not one thing. What came off the table fed the pot, and the pot fed the dog, and the dog kept the farm, and round it went. Nothing thrown away, nothing bought that didn't need buying. That is a kind of wisdom we have very near forgot, and it is worth the remembering. That set in the cold broth is the gelatin, and the gelatin is the thing that feeds the joints. An old farm dog runs and jumps and works and climbs in and out of the wagon his whole life through, and his joints take a hard beating for it, same as a working man's do. The broth gives back to him the very stuff his joints are built from, the collagen, the gelatin, the good soft things that keep the cartilage cushioned and the hinges swinging free.
You've seen an old dog stiff getting up of a cold morning, sore in the hips, slow on the stairs, groaning as he settles.
That's the joints crying out. And folks spend a small fortune now on powders and pills and chews to quiet that ache, when the very same good was sitting in the stock pot all along, cheap and warm and gentle as a hand. A spoon of that broth over his food each day, and an old dog keeps his spring in him years longer than he'd any right to expect. And I'll say a word here about the marrow, for it is a thing all its own. When those big beef bones have simmered down the whole day long, there's a soft, rich marrow left in the hollow heart of them, and that marrow is about as nourishing a thing as a body can give a dog. It is where the strength lives. In the hard old days, when the winters were long and lean, and there wasn't much to go around for man nor beast, it was the marrow that carried a working dog through a little marrow, scraped out warm onto his food, and he'd have the deep, steady fire in him to work the whole day in the cold, and never flag. It builds the blood. It puts the muscle on a thin dog and holds it on him. A pup that's slow to fill out, a poor doer that stays scrawny no matter what you feed him, will often come right and fill in fine on a bit of marrow and broth. It is the old, plain fuel of a working animal, and there is nothing new nor fancy come along since that does the job any better. For that is the other thing folks forget about a farm dog he had to work. He wasn't kept for a pet to lie on a cushion. He worked stock. He ran the fields. He stood guard through the cold nights. And a dog cannot do that hard, steady labor on light, airy food out of a bag. He wants real fuel in him, the kind that burns long and slow. And the bone and the broth gave him exactly that, a deep, lasting strength that held him up to sundown. You'd see it plain in the working of him. The farm dog didn't tire the way the town dog tires. He had bottom to him. He had wind. And that came, like all the rest of it, came straight up out of the bowl. And there is more that the broth will do, for it is a generous thing. It is the kindest medicine on this earth for a poorly belly. When a dog goes off, his feed won't eat, can't hold a thing down. Gone low and quiet in the corner, the broth is what brings him home again. It is warm, and it is easy, and it slips down him when nothing solid will. It carries strength into a sick dog without ever asking his sore stomach to do the hard work of digesting. It settles the gut. It coats it, and it calms it. My grandmother nursed many a sick dog and many a sick calf back from the very edge on nothing in the world but warm broth, spooned in a little at a time, hour by hour, and I have done the same with my own two hands, more times than I can count. A dog that will not so much as sniff his supper will most often lap at broth. And once he is lapping, why, he is already halfway back to you. It brings the appetite home. It is good, too, for the dog that won't drink enough water in the heat, for the broth is mostly water, and he'll take it down gladly when he'd walk right past a plain bowl. It is good for the young pup just come off his mother, easing him gentle onto the harder food. For the broth is soft and warm, and near enough to what he's known, and it lets him grow into real feeding without a sore belly to show for it. And it is good for the mother herself, the nursing bitch worn thin from feeding a whole litter, for she gives so much of her own strength over to those pups that she wants building back up. And there is nothing builds her back, gentler nor faster, than good warm broth with the marrow in it. It is good poured warm over dry kibble for the old dog whose nose is dull and whose appetite's worn thin as paper for the smell of it, wakes him up and calls him back to the dish and sets his old tail to wagging again. There is not one single stage in the whole of a dog's life, from the weaning clean through to the gray muzzle at the end, that the broth does not serve and serve well. And I'll give you one more good it does, for the plain pleasure of it, if for nothing else. A dog fed this way, bone and broth, carries a coat that shines. The good fats and the gelatin and all those minerals drawn up out of the bone, they feed the skin from the inside out, and it shows.
The coat lies down flat and glossy. The dry flaking clears. The scratching and the itching quiet right down.
You can pick out a well-fed farm dog clear across a field just by the shine that's on him. And that shine does not come squirted out of a little bottle of oil onto his supper. It comes up from within, from what's in the bowl, the way every true and lasting good thing does. I have seen this proved with my own eyes, and it settled the matter for me for good and all. Years back there was a litter, and 2 pups out of it went 2 different ways. One stayed here on the farm with me and his brother, from the very same mother and the very same day, went to live in town with good, kind folk who loved him dearly and fed him the best bag money could buy. Now these were the same dog near enough coming to the world side by side, but by the time they were grown you would not have called them kin. Mine was lean and hard and bright-eyed, his coat like a crow's wing, sound in every tooth, and his poor brother in town loved just as well. Mine, wanting for nothing his folks could buy, was soft and heavy and dull in the coat, forever scratching and gray about the muzzle years before he ought to have been. Same blood, same start, all the difference in the world. And every bit of that difference came off the end of a spoon. It was the bull. It is always, always the bull. Now, one more honest word, and this one is important, so hear me well. The broth you give a dog must be plain. Plain as plain can be. No onion in it and no garlic, those two will poison a dog. And that is no old wives' tale. It is the sober truth. So you keep them clean out of the pot. No salt poured in. No seasoning. No bouillon cube out of the store, for those are heavy with salt and full of things a dog has no need of. Just the bones and the water and that little splash of vinegar and the hard fat lifted off the top when it's gone cold. Plain. That is the broth that heals and helps. The stuff that comes in the can or the box off the store shelf, salted and spiced for a man's tongue, is not the same thing at all, and it can do a dog real harm. So make it yourself, plain, with your own hands, or don't make it at all. And understand me clear on this last thing. What I'm handing you is food, not medicine. It builds a dog up. It keeps him sound. It comforts a poorly belly, and it eases a stiff old joint, and it puts the shine back on him. But if a dog is truly badly sick, if he is down and cannot rise, if there is blood, if he's in real and lasting pain, then the broth is a comfort, and it is no cure. And that dog wants a doctor of animals. And he wants one quick. I would not have you sitting at home spooning broth into a dog while something serious worsens in him. Use the broth for what the broth is for. It is a builder and a keeper of health. It is not a healer of the grave, and I'll not pretend to you that it is. So how did we lose it? How did a thing this cheap, this simple, and this plainly good get crowded near clean out of every kitchen in the land? Well, I'll tell you, and it's no great wicked villain, and no one-man scheme, it was only the slow drift of things. Somewhere along the way, they put the dog's food up in a bag and set it on a shelf, and they told us it was easier, and I'll grant them that it was. And then they told us it was complete, that it had every last thing a dog could ever want folded right into it, and we believed them, for it was printed there in fine bold letters right on the sack. So the bones stopped going to the dog. They went into the trash instead, and the broth stopped getting made, for who has got a whole day to stand and simmer a pot when the bag is right there by the door, and the dog's well. The dogs got softer. The teeth went bad sooner. The joints stiffened up younger. The bag cost a little more every single year, and the vet bills climbed right along beside it, and hardly a soul stopped to reckon that we had thrown clean away the very thing that once kept the old dog sound and living long.
We did not lose it because it quit working. We lost it because somebody had a thing to sell.
And a plain old bone can't be sold for much of anything at all. So there it is. The whole of it, the one plain thing the old farmers put in the bowl, and everything it does. The raw bone to keep the teeth clean and the jaw strong. The long, slow simmered broth to feed the joints and settle the gut and bring back a lost appetite and lay a shine on the coat and carry a dog gentle through every year of his life, from the weaning clear through to the gray muzzle at the last. One bone, one pot, near free, and worth more than a whole shelf of bright and costly bottles. That is the plain truth of it, and it cost the old folks nothing but the trouble of the caring and the time. Now I would truly like to hear from you, and I read every last word you send, so don't be shy of it. Tell me down in the comments what you put in your own dog's bowl, the old ways your own people handed down to you, the plain things that kept your animals sound and strong. And tell me, too, what part of the country you're writing to me from, for I do love to know where these old ways still live on and get remembered. And next time, I'll show you what the old farmers gave a dog to keep the worms off him and the fleas out of his coat, without ever once reaching for a bottle from the store, another plain thing, cheap as dirt, that most folks have clean and clear forgotten. And it works, I'll promise you that, for I have leaned on it my whole life long, and my people leaned on it before me. It kept them all well, and it will keep yours too. Till then, keep to the old ways. They kept us well enough all these long years, and they'll keep your animals too.